Welcome to Money Convos, where we discuss personal finance and investment tips. We're committed to helping people create wealth and achieve financial freedom. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast. All right then, let's head into today's conversation.
Yeah, hi everyone. In today's conversation, we just want to look at one economic indicator that keeps coming up in conversations and in news items. And it's GDP, gross domestic product. The idea behind this conversation is to see how it affects the layman. The economists and the politicians and the business people have a way of having these discussions. They know why it's important to them and all that. But it's also good for the average person to know how GDP affects them, and also to know how we impact GDP and whether it will be in our interest to care about it or not. And if we do care about it, what do we need to do about it? What do we need to do in our own capacity to make sure that it's good or bad, depending on how this conversation goes. But I think, generally speaking, GDP is something that you want more of. So yeah, that's what this conversation is going to be about. Thank you all for making the time this Sunday evening. I would invite some of you to come up. Let's make it interactive. Let's try to delve into thoughts that people have, the average person has on these things without being too technical about it. So Dennis, Prince, please do join me up here if you're in a position to speak. And anyone in the audience should feel free. Wow, Staggy, it's been a minute since I saw you. So yeah. Great to see you in here. Hello, Prince. How you doing?
Hello, Alekem. I'm doing fine. Yourself?
Good. I noticed we've been missing you. And then you made the first reappearance last week when we were talking about going to Canada.
Oh, I'm just in the background listening.
I see. Anyway, are you in a position to engage today?
Oh, fine. Yeah, we can have a discussion. Yeah.
All right. Great. So I guess we could start with a definition of GDP. What is GDP? And I want to avoid the technicalities and jargon. So I would, in my opinion, or my understanding of the term, it's about the quantity of goods and services that are produced in a country. And this is usually put in a currency format. So imagine all the bicycles that will be produced in Ghana, it's produced and sold in Ghana, all the maize that we grow, we harvest and sell, all the timber we harvest and sell, all the cement we produce and sell, all the final products, not intermediate goods, final products that we produce and sell in Ghana. That's what we would be constituting as our GDP. So it's a measure of production. And it's not just production of hard items or physical items. There's also services. So like Prince, as you offer people insurance services, that's a service. It's not something that people can go and touch. So every time you do a trade, your fees would count into GDP. So yeah, that's a good sense of GDP. I'll just briefly talk about the formula, how it's calculated, the components that go into it. And it's a summation of some things. And just when I was preparing for this, something hit me. It's about imports, the impact imports have on our GDP. And I think it's something that if we start paying attention to, we may have a new perspective or more perspective on our economic situation. So this is how GDP goes. I think there are two types. There are two formulas, but I want to go by this formula, which says you take consumption of individuals. So every time you go and buy kinke, you buy bread, anytime you buy anything, that's a transaction involving a final production of goods and services. The value of that, if your kinke was 3 cedis, then that's contributing to that 3 cedis is going to contribute to the GDP. Then you look at investments. That's the investments that businesses are making to go into production of goods and services. So you look at investments, you add that to your consumption. You also look at how much the government is spending. And we know what government spends on. Government spends on wages and salaries. Government spends on money. They spend on projects for construction and all that good stuff. So GDP is effectively separating various forms of expenditure. That's what individuals do, what businesses do, and what government does. And then there's the net exports part. This part is interesting. So you take all exports, the value of our cocoa that we sell abroad, the value of our gold that we sell abroad, the value of our crude oil that we take abroad to sell, anything that we produce in Ghana and we sell outside. I know some people who produce clothes in Ghana to go and sell abroad. That's all exports, right? We take that, and then we take out the value of stuff that we import into the country. That means the car that you imported, because you didn't go with a Kantanka car, or you didn't go with a VW that is manufactured in Ghana, or any of the cars that are manufactured in Ghana. You didn't go with those ones, but you went for a car that was manufactured entirely outside of Ghana. So that import includes you import, or that was brought into the country to sell to you. That's an import. We look at the value of that. Effectively, anything that's imported, we take that value into consideration, but it's a negative in the GDP formula. So we call it net exports because we look at how much we send outside of Ghana versus how much we bring into Ghana. And that net is what goes into our GDP. All right. So now we do that, and then we come up with a gross domestic product number. To give you an example of what's been happening lately, in Ghana's GDP in 2022 was $72 billion, $72.8 billion. And that was a drop from, not a drop per se. In 2021, it was $79 billion. And then in 2020, it was $70 billion. I would have to get a bit technical right now for us to note something. Even though it looks like the number dropped from 79 to 72 billion from 2021 to 2022, and you would think that, well, if the number dropped, then it was then GDP fell. Actually, with GDP, when they are calculating it, they take out the effect of inflation. So in doing that, they come up with a real growth number. That says, assuming the prices were constant, what is the growth, GDP growth? And for 2022, our GDP grew by 3.2%. For 2021, it grew by 5%. 2020, COVID, it grew by just 0.5%. The year before COVID, that's 2019, it grew by 6.5%. So you get the idea. We look at the nominal figure of GDP, that's in whatever currency, and the example I'm using is dollars. And then what's also important is the growth rate, because ideally you want to see that the Ghanaian economy is growing all the time. Usually when people say the Ghanaian economy is doing well or the economy is growing, the default indicator that they use is GDP. It's like a summation of all that the country has done. And it's just one simple number. Although there are other economic indicators in there, it's one simple, easy to understand number. So yeah, that's a bit about how GDP is computed and its definition, what it takes into consideration. Do you have any thoughts about this? Any questions? Anything that we've been enlightened on? Prince, what do you think of this understanding of GDP? Do you have a different way you look at it?
For me, I think you've broken it down to the simplest form that can inform us as to how it's arrived at and basically what it is when you are talking about GDP. So for me, I think the explanation is quite quite better. Trying to bring it down to not using the technical jargons, but sticking to the ones that we can easily remember. So I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely remember the kinky you bought earlier, so that helps. Okay, great. But I'm curious, have you had any perspective about GDP? Whenever it comes up, what does it trigger in your mind when you are listening to the news or you hear people talking about economic issues and that term comes up?
For me, when listening to news and I hear people talk about GDP, first of all, it rings a bell to me as in something that is very crucial when it comes to economics in the country. Simply because it provides you insight in the overall economic health and the performance of a nation. So, for me, when I'm much more will be interested to listen to news regarding GDP because I want to know how healthy the economy is and how good the economy is performing. So for me, that is what I look out for when I hear that word.
Okay, cool. An indicator of how well the country is doing. All right, great. Thanks for sharing that. Nana Preku, welcome up stage. Thank you for opting to share your opinion. What do you think about GDP?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. In your presentation, you made mention of when they measuring the GDP, they do away with inflation. So I was a little bit confused saying that because you mentioned of GDP of last year and last 2 years. And so if you do away with inflation, then the actual GDP or the measure of the GDP or the state of the country economic growth could be declined or I was a little bit confused there.
Okay,
So if
great.
you could come out for me.
Yeah, good. So I avoided bringing an economist, a proper economist here so that we could make sure that we have a lay conversation, something that people could understand easily. So pardon me if anyone is an economist and you have a better way of explaining this. I'll try to do it in lay terms as much as possible. So let's look at the numbers I mentioned. 2021 was $79 billion. 2022, $72 billion. You would have thought that meant our GDP went down. And like you noted, I said that GDP adjusts for inflation. So how does it factor into this? When they calculated the annual GDP growth rate, they said it was 3.2%. Although we see the number drop from 79 to 72, they say it's 3.2%. Now, that's the fact that the annual growth is positive shows that it's adjusting for inflation. What do I mean? Many things happened in Ghana. In December, inflation ended around 54%, right? One of the another factor that a major factor that played into our inflation was the cedi's depreciation against the dollar. I think it ended the year around 20 or 30 something percent. If we are producing goods and services in Ghana, our currency is cedis. If the reporting currency is dollars, that means even if we had produced the same, let's say, 1 billion cedis of goods and services, and that translated to, let's say, 100 million in goods in dollar terms, right? $100 million. The second year, with the cedis FX rates going up so high, that means we'll have fewer dollars for that same amount of money. So fewer dollars for the same amount of cedis, right? So even if we produce the same 1 billion cedis worth, this time it will no more be $100 million. It will probably be $80 million. You see, so that's where the GDP figure is saying that it would be wrong for us to say that Ghana produced fewer goods. So let's adjust for any rises in the increase of any general rises in the increase of goods and the prices of goods and services. That's inflation, right? Let's adjust for that and say that, okay, last year they sold 10 cars. This year, how many cars did they sell? 11 cars. If they sold 11 cars, then we can say it's 10% growth, regardless of the change in the price of the car. Maybe last year they were selling cars at 10,000 cedis. Now they want to sell cars at 9,000 cedis. We won't say that it has gone down. We just say that the quantity of goods and services increased, right? So that's the kind of the approach that they use to make sure that we can say that, well, ignoring inflation, we know inflation made things look bad, but when you clear out all that noise, they will adjust for it and say, well, it wasn't negative, it was 3.2%. Am I kind of bringing it home for you a bit?
Yes.
Okay. Please don't be shy. If I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, again, I try to avoid bringing economists here. But if you want to push further, we can try to get better understanding of this together. Okay, great. Thank you for the question. Give us an opportunity to say some stuff. So I see Adam has come up. Adam, welcome on stage. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I am now on my way home and it's in the noisy place, so I will be on it.
That's good. Glad to hear you are good and you could join us still. Thank you. All right. So what we are going to do is, next is, let's talk a bit more about GDP, right? Why does it affect us? That's really the crust of the matter. Why can't we just leave it to the professionals and the finance people and the bankers, the economists? Let them be the ones to be talking about GDP. Why should you, the average person, be thinking about it? All right. So let's look at some of the reasons. Generally speaking, it's good knowledge to know about how the economy is doing, because that's how investors will view the country. And yes, I know it sounds some way we are in our country thinking about what foreigners care about. Actually, some of these investors may even be just me and you. Imagine you have 1,000 cedis, and in fact, actually, a lot of you can relate to this example I'm coming to give. You are in a situation where you realize that, okay, the economy of Ghana is not doing so well. When you get your money, would you be so confident investing in business? No. But when everything when the GDP is growing, business is booming, people are getting jobs, things are going on well, then you say, you know what, I'm confident that I can invest in the Ghanaian economy. I can go and buy real estate and I know that later I can sell it to make a profit. If I import cars to sell, I can make profit. If you're a farmer, you know that if you produce stuff and you want to sell, there will be money in people's pockets to buy it. So when GDP is growing rapidly, or when it's growing healthily, then people are more confident about investing their time and energy to produce goods and services for the next person. So if it's not doing well, perhaps you may realize that people will just cut back from producing certain services, and you may be missing out on certain things that you need. So that's one angle to go. Prince, how about you? I see you raised your hand. Any angle or question you wanted to add?
Okay, so I just wanted to ask a question. I wanted to find out when you use, is GDP the only what's the name? I want to use a certain words. Is it the only thing that we can use to look at how well a country is doing, or you have other things that you can also look at as well?
You reminded me of, sir. This question reminds me of something someone said that we all tease the person. Well, simple answer to your question is no. GDP is not the only one. GDP is one of the easiest to understand. Everything we've produced. Oh, okay. That's good. Like, take any family. If we say, okay, is this family productive? Or take your business. How will you know if your business is productive? It's about how much you've generated, right? How much sales are you making? Of course, you count your costs also. But in this one, for the nation, we look at it, for this measure, we look only in terms of total, the top line, the revenue end of things, right? Okay. But it just reminds me of what, Baumia was saying. other indicators. Sometimes the FX rate is also an indicator. Actually, it's not sometimes. The FX rate, the direction in which it goes, and the magnitude of that direction. If your currency is depreciating, where our economy is, chances are that our city will always depreciate against the US dollar. So direction is not so much of a problem, right? But it's the magnitude. If it's depreciating at 20, 30, 40%, that's a problem. If it's depreciating at just 4, 5%, it's okay. It's all right. They are much bigger than us. Certain things, it makes sense, so those are some other indicators. I guess the word we'll be trying to pin down is what ways can we tell the health of the fundamentals of the economy? Oh my man. He said if your economy is not, your fundamentals are not strong, your exchange rates will expose you. Anyway. So yeah, thank you for that question, Prince. It's not the only sign, and soon I'll come to a point where I think I some cons I see about using just GDP. All right. So yeah, another thing that reason I think people should care about GDP is it creates more jobs, or the perception of GDP creates more jobs. See, sometimes it's not only about what has happened. Like GDP is what we call a lagging indicator. So there are leading indicators and lagging indicators. All right. Lagging indicators just means, well, this thing has already happened and this indicator is used to tell you about it. So the goods were produced last year, and now they are giving you the number, they finished counting and they are saying this is what was produced last year. It's a lagging indicator. However, people may have a perception and say, well, okay, last year things were good last year. This year, the ABCD is happening this year. So we think that things will do better. Now, if you think things in the country are going to do better, then you'll be more motivated to do what? To employ an extra person. When you pay attention to the US, last year and earlier this year, there were a lot of layoffs. Why? Because during COVID, when certain businesses saw opportunity to, especially in the tech space, they realized that their revenues were going to go up because people are starting to demand a lot of digital services, remote access. A lot of people are working from home, real estate, people are moving to different towns. What happened? They employed more people. Maybe on a normal day when things are hard, you will be doing the work for 3 people. But when people, when the economy is looking more optimistic, your manager will say, okay, Prince, you know what? I see that you've been working very hard. You are doing the work of 3 people. I'll employ one person so that the person can take some of the load off you. You see, because your manager will be thinking, or the business owner will be thinking, even though it's going to cost me money to hire a new person, I know that the kind of work that the person will produce, it will generate revenue that can offset the costs. So that's why I think we generally should be thinking about GDP. As it's going up, people will get a sense of some optimism about the future prospects of the economy. If it's going down then you need to adjust yourself appropriately. Another angle too is it's not just about general jobs. It's about when GDP is growing, or GDP is a certain number, you need to ask what contributed to GDP. So if you pay attention to what some of the information that the Ministry of Finance puts out, sometimes they say non-oil GDP. They try to calculate the GDP of the country without oil, because oil is relatively new in our country, in our economy. It's not like cocoa, which has been with us for many decades. It's not like gold, which has been with us for centuries. You see, it's new. So they try to say, okay, if we didn't have the oil, what would have been our GDP? And they know that oil is a huge chunk, or it's a significant chunk of the GDP or production in our country. So they just want to adjust for it. So you as an individual, you could ask yourself, well, okay, I hear Ghana has discovered more oil wells. or they're about to discover some in 5-10 years. So it will make sense for me to go to school for 4 years or 3 years to go and do a master's in whatever, to come and work in the oil and gas industry. If you see healthcare is booming and there's opportunity for growth there, then you say, fine, then I want to go and be a nurse, I want to go and be a doctor, or I want to be a pharmacist, or I want to get into logistics and buying and selling, or logistics of producing medical equipment, that kind of thing. See, these are some of the pieces of information that when we have these, that when we discuss with our friends and family, can inform their career decisions. Someone may be at a point in their life where they finish high school, they want to know, what job should I go for? What should I study in undergrad, in my bachelor's degree? If you have somebody who has some insights, you can go ask, okay, one of the things I've heard about is GDP. What do you think GDP is going to be in like 5-10 years after my sister or my brother has graduated from university? You see, that helps inform you, all right, in making your career decisions. Also, if you realize that an industry is not booming or is not going to boom, maybe you know that you're in the, let's say, you're in the, should I say Gala? Not Galamsey. You are in an industry that is seeing a lot of change. Maybe you own a fleet of taxis, yes. But you start realizing that tech is booming. Uber is becoming more popular. Maybe you should make a decision to sell out of your normal yellow taxis, yellow and red or yellow and whatever color taxi. Sell those taxis, buy newer cars, Picantos, i10s, or whatever is hot these days for Uber. And that way, you'll be more sustainable. Otherwise, if you stick to the yellow and other color taxis, you may get limited limited demand from customers because people want the ease of using technology or they want the safety that it brings for whatever reason. So yeah, these are some ways that can affect your jobs, your investments, yeah. Any thoughts about any of the stuff I've said so far?
I think they all make quite. I think it's in the right direction. Let me say that. Let me use that word. Yeah. So I think you are making quite some, giving us the information. So you can please go ahead.
Okay, great. All right, good. So another thing that GDP is good for. Prince, you asked this question about indicators for checking the health. GDP as an indicator for checking the health of a country, a lot of times we use it to check debt sustainability. Now, for me, this is a point I was saying earlier on that I'll come to some of my reservations. I personally have a problem with using GDP as a metric for debt sustainability. I think you may be comparing apples with oranges. But there's a term, debt to GDP ratio. They've said that Ghana's debt to GDP ratio is very high. They need to bring it down. Maybe a sustainable number is maybe 50-60%. It varies. US, Japan, they have very high debt to GDP ratios. And even among the biggest Western countries, they have very different GDP, debt to GDP rates, right? And so it's really hard to pinpoint it. But when a developing country like ours is going through certain economic challenges and you see that our debt to GDP is high, you realize that it makes a lot of sense why we are in trouble. We are taking on way more debt or debt faster than the rate at which we are growing how much we produce. Think about it like your salary. Ideally, think about it as your salary. If you've ever had an auto loan to purchase your car or to purchase a mortgage or to do anything, the bankers, before they give you the loan, they would say that, well, okay, what's your salary? How much do you make? They don't want to have to make you pay more than 40 or so. I think it's 40% of your income in debt. And that's even income after taxes. So that would determine how much of a loan you can take. You see, so what the governments do is the more GDP they have, the more impetus they have to go and borrow. And for me, I think that becomes that yields a spiral effect or a vicious cycle. I mean, a vicious cycle of saying, okay, the government will say, well, look, Ghana is doing well. We have our GDP going up. As GDP is going up, you see, it's a fraction. If debt remains, let's say 10, and GDP starts from, let's say 20, all right, that means your debt to GDP ratio is 50%. When your debt remains the same, but your GDP increases from 20 to 30, that means your GDP has doubled. Now you say that, well, now my fraction is now 10 over 30. That's around 33%. I've moved down. I'm looking better because I've moved down from 50% to 33%. The higher the number, the more unsustainable it is, just to be clear. So what does that mean? Well, that means I can go and borrow more so that I come back to that 50% level. And we all know where we are at with all this borrowing in Ghana right now. Now we can't pay our debt. You see, we can't pay off our debt. We can't pay even the interest on our debt. And that's a problem. So I feel like the overindulgence of finance people or economists and politicians and government people on debt to GDP, it creates a vicious cycle and it gives them the impetus to borrow unsustainably. Because really, there's no evidence to say that maybe 100% debt to GDP ratio is good or 70% is good. Different developed countries, you have different rates. The question is, can you afford to pay your bills? So now back to what Prince was saying. In this case, really, we should be looking at government's debt and compare that to government's revenue, tax revenue, or however the government makes money. And then on that, we realize that most of the money that government makes is spent on paying salaries and interest on our loans. So you realize that really we are in a very unsustainable place. Why does this matter to you as an individual? I know I've been going on for a while. When our debt to GDP ratio is high, and foreigners or not even foreigners, generally investors in general are looking at the country, they'll say that we are more risky. If our GDP is not growing, they'll say we are risky. Would they want to do business with us? No. In fact, forget the foreigners. Even you in Ghana, you have an extra 1,000 cedis or an extra 2,000 cedis you want to invest. If you see that our economy is not growing and we are taking on more debt, you will give yourself some pause before you invest in treasury bill again. You give yourself some pause before you go and put money anywhere, because you are like, will this, you ask yourself, will this business really be able to generate the income? Yeah, it's a brilliant business idea. It's nice. But do people have money that they can afford to spend on these products and services right now? If not, then you have to ask yourself, what type of business will you do? Maybe instead of doing luxury goods, you'd rather go and do staples. Maybe get into rice production or something, or chicken, poultry farming, because those things people always eat. Rice, people always eat. Gary, people always eat. You don't even have to do adverts for Gary, you see. So those are some of the things that you need to be thinking about as an individual who has money that you want to invest, or even if your money is somewhere and you are making a decision, should I continue this investment or not? All right. So yeah, that there's one downside to that. Anyway, next I would like to move on to talk about what we can do about this. Yes, we are saying that we are saying that GDP is important to think about, but it's for the whole nation. What can we as individuals do? I'll get to that in a moment. But does anyone have any thoughts, any questions, any comments at this point before I move on? While you gather your thoughts, just a reminder to anyone who just joined. Today we are having a conversation about economic indicators, and we are focusing on GDP. That's gross domestic product. It comes up in the news. It comes up whenever we are talking about the economy. But does everyone understand what it means? No. So we are having a conversation as friends just here, having money convos on this, just to explain it to people. And it's been explained that gross domestic product is trying to sum up the value of all the goods and services produced in a country in a given year. I think I didn't mention that earlier. It's calculated periodically. So it can be for a given year, it can be for a quarter. Usually when the number is presented, it's for a given year. How do we come up with this with this number? We look at the total consumption or the total expenditure that individuals make. You going to buy bread, going to buy kinky, going to buy shoes, going to do whatever. You're an individual. Just tally up all the value of all the final products that were produced, the final products and services that were produced in Ghana during the year. Then they also look at investment. That's business side of things. How much are they investing in their business by way of buying, whether it's capital assets like buildings, equipment, machinery, all that stuff, right? Things that will go into production of goods and services. Then we also look at the government side of things. What does the government spend money on? That also comes in there. And then we look at net exports. That is, we take our exports as positive. All the cocoa that we sold outside of Ghana, all the gold we sold outside of Ghana, all the crude oil that we produced in Ghana, but we sold to people outside of Ghana. If you are a tailor, a seamstress, or into fashion design, let me use that word. You're into fashion design and you produce clothes, maybe kente or whatever, to sell to Ghanaians in the diaspora. That is an export, you see. So that's calculated. Also, then we take out the value of imports. We reduce our total production number by the value of the stuff we import into the country. So the value of the cars that we are importing, the value of the food we are importing, the tomatoes that we are bringing in from Burkina, all those things, the value of any items that are coming from outside Ghana into Ghana that Ghanaians will be buying and selling, we take it out. So we realize that imports really harms us and we need to check our preferences. But anyway, that was kind of a summary of what we've discussed so far. Any questions, any thoughts?
All right, so Elikem, I have this question I want to find out from you. So, if a country is having a higher GDP, does it mean that they are currently having a good financial management in the country?
You've asked a question. Yeah, you've asked a very good question. Let's look up some examples. Okay, I want to use US and China as an example. So US is the largest economy. All right. So quickly look up GDP of US. In fact, where's ChatGPT? I had ChatGPT open, and now we are going high tech with this thing. All right. So what's the? Just a second while I put in the prompt. I just want to give you a good example. So I want to find out the GDP of the US. So GDP of US is $22 trillion. Okay. China is $17 trillion. That's just the total figure. But we all know that China has way more people, has billions of people, compared to US is about 330, 350 million people. So another metric we use to adjust for this is the GDP per capita. All right. Again, here, US is doing better than China. US has GDP per capita of $68,000 per person, and China has $12,000 per person. What does GDP per capita mean? It means when we look at the entire the total GDP for the country and we divide it by the population, assuming that everybody did equal work, how much value did each person produce for the country? We are counting even the babies here. We are doing serious child labor over here. just a simplifying statistic. Okay, so that's the idea behind GDP per capita. It kind of levels the ground for different countries that you are comparing. I'm trying to figure out. Let me look at Singapore. I know Singapore is a much smaller country. I want to compare that with China and India. Okay, so Singapore, good. I like this. So Singapore's GDP is $372 billion. Let's take India. India's GDP is 3.2 trillion. Okay. So almost 10 times the GDP of Singapore. But we all know Singapore is a tiny country. However, someone can say, well, another way to look at it is, how about you look at GDP per capita? And if you do that, you'd see that Singapore's GDP per capita is 64,000. That is close to United States at 68,000 and well above China at 12,000 and definitely above India at 2,000. So it's true that when you compare two countries, one may have bigger GDP than the other, but it is not necessarily true that one economy is being managed better than the other. In a country like Singapore, you can say that the fact that they have such a high GDP per capita means they are able to use the small resources that they have more efficiently than other countries. See, given where they are at, they are able to do way better. So that's one way to look at it. There are many other indicators that you need to consider if you really want to make this answer of, is the economy doing better or not? Sometimes, actually not sometimes. That's where GDP growth comes to play. The developed countries like Japan, US, UK, Germany, their GDPs are already so big. There's only so much more they can grow. So they have very small GDP growth, like low single digits. But we in the developing countries, and this is where I guess you talk about BRICS keeps coming up, right? These countries have way more potential to grow. So their GDP growth should be well above 5%. So we can say that, well, yeah, US is where they are, but they are not growing fast. Imagine you are running a race and the people ahead of you, yeah, they are well ahead of you in terms of distance, but they are not going as fast as you. You that you are growing, you that you are smaller, you are going at a faster speed. Hopefully, you can catch up to them and maybe surpass them. And that's what that should be your goal. So even if you are small, the question then is, are you growing? So in developing countries, again, more directly to Prince, your question, an indicator, instead of just taking GDP, a modification is, okay, a political party has been in power for the last 4 years or the last 8 years. Comparing the GDP growth before they came to now, has GDP been growing faster than before they came? If it has been growing faster in their time than before they came, then you can say, okay, they are doing a better job of managing the economy. But if, let's say, they are doing 10%, you say, oh, fine, we can clap for you. But if you go back and you do the analysis and you look at before they came, GDP growth rate was 15%. Then you realize that no. These people are not managing the thing well. They've slowed down the ship. And nobody likes that. You see, so there are multiple angles that you need to look at the situation. There's also the issue of debt. There's also another issue of unemployment, which we can discuss at another session of basic economics. There are many other indicators. So yeah, hopefully over time we'll be having more of these conversations and looking at other indicators and how they affect us and how they can help us assess the performance of a government. Yeah, Prince, does that help?
Yes. That helps. And just also ask one last question. Okay.
Sure.
So we've been talking about GDP today, and I want to find out, when a country is having a high GDP, I'm looking at economies that is mostly driven with natural resources, right? So, meaning that if a country is having a high GDP, then it means that for most intensive economic resources that countries has, it's like they are utilizing it to the maximum capacity, right? Does it have an impact on, let's say, the general environmental landscape, or it doesn't lead to any other thing that affects human beings? Talking about global warming and other stuff.
Your question took a curveball into global warming, but
I bet you.
But I guess I get I think I get the question you are asking. If let me check if I understand your question. So you are trying to find out if a country has more natural resources, are they more likely to have a higher GDP? Is that your question?
So my question is like countries that are they are especially resource intensive. They have a lot of resource intensive industries in the country that uses their resources in manufacturing, right? Can we in a way of we producing more to increase our GDP, does it in turn affect the environment?
Oh, okay. I get your question now. I think this matter we may need some. That's a good point. We may need to bring a specialist in there, but look, somebody who is more into the environment. But in fact, we all know what's going on with global warming, climate change, and all that. So yes, it depends on the kind of activities and what resources that are being tapped. If you are clearing the Amazon, you're affecting to produce to build factories. That's a problem. Ghana, you are clearing rainforest to do galamsey and shooting funny videos, insulting the president. You are affecting natural resources because you are causing erosion. You are destroying the land. Whatever what's it called? Fertile or fertility there is in the soil, that's gone. You put in so many chemicals there, it seeps into the water. This way we need Edem, the geology and those things. Is it the water bed, the underground water? All those chemicals they seep in there, they affect water supply to nearby communities and sometimes even further away. When the chemicals go into the water bodies, now our is it River Prow? So when you look at it from the top, it's not clear white or blue as you would want it. It's so brown, it's so dirty, people can't drink from it, or it's not safe to drink from anymore. Yes, all these kind of activities they affect it. If you require a lot of logistics to track, to move all your yams from the hinterlands to bring it to the city, that's a lot of carbon monoxide going into the atmosphere, all that. So yes, in a nutshell, economic activity creates pollution. That's why there are drives towards sustainability. What is the more energy efficient way to produce the same resources that we want? What is the less polluting way to produce those goods and services that we want? People are saying electric cars, so that and link them to solar, because even if you are using thermal plants, you are still burning crude natural gas, or using a crude plant, you are burning crude oil to produce the electricity. So rather use hydro. All these are some of the considerations. So yes, coal is even the more developed countries, they are talking about coal because a lot of electricity is produced by coal I think in the UK, for example, so yeah, it's something that comes up quite often. So Prince, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, yes, please, it does. Thank you very
Good.
much.
So maybe Ghanaians can start taking up electric cars. Anyway, pardon me. We don't even have lights to boil water for tea. All right. Again, exaggeration. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to close out with some of the ways that if we care, we can take action about GDP. So generally speaking, we all want our GDP to grow because it helps increase investment opportunities. With those investment opportunities come jobs for all of us, and means for us to put our money away for the money to grow. So we need to care about this, and also it improves our credibility. We as individuals can borrow more. If the government is not seen as credible, then the interest rates for us will go through the roof, because there's even what's supposed to be safe, which is the benchmark, is that rate will be so high, then the rest of us will be adding on top of that. You see, so all these are concerns that things that we should be concerned about. So we need to help out. Now, at this point, I would encourage you all. Let's share some thoughts, right? I don't want us to get too political, and I don't want us to get too much into the problems of Ghana and all that. But generally speaking, it's all about production. How are we being productive? How are we using the knowledge and skills that we have to generate value for other people. It could be by way of physical products, or it could be by way of services. Maybe you are good at something. Are you teaching other people, starting a business? You are charging people, or I'll give you this information so that you can go and do something else. How are you generating income for yourself? And that by you generating income for yourself, of course, legally, you are helping to promote productivity in Ghana. All right. Also, it's not just about production of goods and services. It's also about it being local. Okay. So again, not to be harsh on any type of business or any type of industry, right? But the more we import, we can see from this formula, the more it reduces our GDP, or the more we import, the less our GDP is. So we need to start curbing our taste for foreign goods. If it's something that we can produce domestically, I think rice, for example, is something that at least now, I think our local rice production has gotten to a point where the taste is good. So you can actually live on locally made rice and you'll be fine. You won't call it, not all of them are too Jimmy. So it'll come out nice, long grain, and you can use it instead of importing from other places. Yeah, you say some people this is me saying such a thing is going to affect people's businesses. Yeah, I know. But all this importation is affecting our economy. It's affecting our debt it's affecting our FX rates. Right now, when the Bank of Ghana releases information, from times when we used to have 4 months of import cover, now it's gone down to days and weeks of import cover. That's how little reserves we have to cover the money that is necessary to pay for the goods and services abroad that we are trying to bring in here. So some of these things, yeah, we can be thinking about it and say you're trying to harm one individual's business. But if we all start producing for ourselves inside here, patronizing locally made stuff, we realize that our general economy would do better. We keep the money that we make in-house rather than keep sending our money to foreigners. It's sadly sometimes some of these things, they are it's a zero-sum game to some extent. You have to take away from Ghana to give it to the foreigner. Yes, you are getting the products you want, but if you can do it in Ghana, why not just do it in Ghana? So, but yeah, if you care about the economy, this some of the things that you should be concerned about. And even if you don't care, don't worry, it will still affect you. Even if you don't care, it will happen. Also, would encourage you to invest more. If you take your money and you just give it to the government in treasury bills, I'm not saying treasury bills are bad, but diversify, right? In fact, what I just said, I'm sure you're all rolling your eyes at me. The government still hasn't paid on some of its treasury bonds, I know. But assuming all things being equal in a good economy, right? That's what we are talking about. Why not rather invest some of your wealth? Of course, you have to diversify, but some of it can go into helping businesses. Even if you put the money in a bank, and then that bank doesn't go and buy treasury bills, but rather they give out loans. Those loans go to fund businesses. Now, those businesses can now produce goods and services that people need, can produce jobs for people to get salary and use those salary to feed their family and feed themselves, afford to buy a house. So it's money is about money moving around. It's not just about going to hide the money under your pillow. If you hide it under your pillow, you've not helped anyone. You've helped yourself. You've helped maybe the armed robbers who are timing you, to come and take it away from you. But we are talking about the economy. We are talking about basic economics you should know. We are talking about how your actions as an individual would affect the whole nation. Yes, you may say you are one person. I get it. One person, you are not going to move the needle. We are not going to change much. But we are all one person, or we are all individuals, but it's the summation of all our individual actions that leave us to the results that we have. Yes, I know our leaders are doing whatever they are doing. But if we don't play our part and we're only waiting for them to do something, it's not going to work out. If we are playing our part, then we can hold them accountable, So, yeah, well, these are just my 2 cents on what we can do about improved knowledge about GDP as individuals. Any thoughts? And then we start wrapping it up. And I'm also curious to know about any other economic indicators or economic terms that you've heard about that you would want us to discuss and delve into, like the way we delved into this one at a layman's level. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand and make a comment or suggest a topic for future discussion. Prince, any thoughts as we conclude?
I think you said all. I think as we spoke about GDP, we've gotten to know it. And as individuals, there's not much we can do, but the little that we can do is what you've shared with us. And I think that it's something that we should all put our heads to it. Even though sometimes you look at certain things, you might want to do otherwise, but sometimes if you look at the general perspective of where your country is, and you want to do something that can also affect the country positively. So it's rightly said. I know this era where we find ourselves sometimes talking about investment is quite it throws some hairs around, but I also believe that it's also another side that we can still know the outlook is not quite good, but I also feel that we should not just focus so much on the outlook, but we should look at what is ahead of us, the bigger picture at the end of the tunnel. So I think you've done justice to the topic. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prince, for some more direction with the information we've received. So yeah, if anyone joined late and is missing some of what we discussed, please feel free to come back here on X after this has ended to play back the conversation we had. You can also go check wherever you listen to podcasts or search on YouTube for Money Convos. You find recordings of our conversation. This will be published in a few days. Last week we had a conversation about moving to people who want to move to Canada, how to go about it, right? So you can go play back that conversation and follow us here on X or Twitter. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe on YouTube and on wherever you listen to your podcast. And while you're on Instagram, follow at investment friend, where we bring the personal finance from the more general information that we provide on Money Convos. We provide more specific information for you. You can reach out to us on investment friend and we can help give you some guidance that will suit your individual situation. Some of the advice or some of the perspectives that we give or the education that we give on Money Convos is more general. So your individual situation may be different, so you need something that's tailored to you. Great. So I see that we have Mr. Alidu and Nana Preku want to share some thoughts before we go. So I'll take Mr. Alidu first, then we come to Nana Preku. Go ahead, Mr. Alidu.
Thank you, host. Good evening, everyone in this space. I was excited to see a few like-minded people talking about economics and how it can impact our country. Normally, when I've had a fling at reading economics, I didn't do deep reading at the undergrad and at the MBA level. And when you read, or when the lecturers stand in front of you, they make everything seem kosher, like demand and supply. Like it's what I want to talk about. Like everything revolves around demand and supply. Once you know when to supply and when to demand, everything will be fine. But then when you look at the practicality, when we are not able to get things right, why is it that it seems like everything is fine on paper? We have a whole lot of lecturers around churning out good students who have excelled in economics. But when it comes to the pragmatism, we are not able to get it right. Maybe some people will talk about political will and the fact that, but shouldn't every government want to get it right so that they are retained in power and or sort of. I don't know where the theory and the pragmatism departs. Why is it that we are not able to get it right? If everything is fine on paper, all we have to do is just follow the rudiments and get it right. Thank you.
To attempt to answer this question is to attempt to take the conversation somewhere that we on Money Convos don't like to go. But I won't get too deep into it. I think it's really I think it's I don't think there's a difference between the theory. I don't think there's much of a difference between theory and good practicality. I say good practicality because I know that our practical in Ghana is not ideal. We are having bad results because we are not doing the right thing. However, a lot of these economic theories, actually, when you follow it, you will do pretty well. When you follow these economic theories, you do pretty well. You take Singapore, for example. They had independence pretty much a few years after Ghana had independence. Malaysia also did, right? They promoted certain local industries. But we just did whatever we wanted, hoping hoping that our prayers will give us good results. Generally speaking, this is just my personal perspective, and people can disagree with me. That's fine. We could complain about our leaders all day, every day, but I interact with Ghanaians on a normal day. We just have bad attitudes. We learn stuff in school and we refuse to practice them well. We go to school and we chastise the people who don't let us copy in the exam. I take, when I was a student back in the day, someone will have a problem with me for not answering when they called me in an exam. If you want to look on my shoulder and see it, fine, that's okay, but I'm not going to actively help you cheat. This person I would have offered to teach you, to tutor you for free, give my time to you to teach you for free. Yes, all you want is apple instead of learning. When these people grow and they start working, what else do we expect? When we chastise people who are hardworking, people who are standing for the right thing, we say that they are book long, they are bad, they are too known. When we chastise them this way, what are we trying to say? We are rewarding bad behavior. I think for the Ghanaian problem really is our behavior. We just refuse to do the right thing. It's more comfortable to do the bad thing. So that's why we end up the way we are. Why will politicians care less about the general economy? Because, they care about their pockets. In the short term, they will get the results that they individually want. The bribery and the corruption, pocketing the kickbacks and all that. But they're not the only crooked people. You go to any office, any government office, or even among people, just general people. I don't even talk civil servants. We know about them. Just general people. Somebody does a favor for you or somebody does some work for you. You pay them their fair price, but they still expect you to tip them or come and thank them with a ram and a cow or something. I'm like, you got value. Like, all these things are things that produce the poor and mediocre results that we have. And we are living the results of our actions. So we really need to start channeling the knowledge that we learn. We learn good things in school. We learn really good things in school. And we just don't take advantage of it. I both hate and love the Ghanaian education system. I feel like if we just practice, I feel like it's half good. But if we took the half that is good seriously, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. My mother once asked me after I was complaining about Ghanaian education system, I was like, but how about you? You went to high school in Ghana, you went to university in Ghana, but look at where you are. How come you are? How did it not work out for you? Like, why didn't you get bad results? I was like, it's all about my perspective, So education is not enough. It's about how you practice it. The teachers have done their part. You do, what are you going to do? Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Yeah. Okay, let's take Nana Preku's comments. Nana, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much. So now I have a question, and the question is about you made me understand that GDP composed of goods and services in the country or produced in the country, including the project that government have been embarking on, being education and all that. So my question now is, so how does the taxes and the taxes and the government's expenditure affect the GDP?
Okay, so taxes affect the government expenditure is government buying goods, right? So that is part of the formula. It's one of the more obvious ones. Individual consumption, so individual spending, business spending, that's investment, and then government spending. So that kind of covers all the players in the economy. Now, on the tax part, that is actually how government affords to get its spending. If the government didn't collect any taxes, then it's safe to say that the government's expenditure would be close to zero, if any at all. You see, so that's how it translates. We all pay the taxes to the government, and then the government uses that money to produce goods and services for us. Taking it a bit a level higher, I believe that the purpose of government was for all of us to say, well, okay, there are certain basic services that if we as individuals we produce, it's inefficient for us to do. So let's pay somebody, a central person, who will now do those bulky projects on our behalf. Roads. Will it be efficient for each person to say, okay, fine, I'll build the road, the road in front of my house. The next neighbor should do the one in front of their house. The road, there'll be inconsistencies. You see, some will say, okay, I can't afford it this year. So next year or 2 years later, before I build my side of the road. So that's where we all contribute, pay the taxes. Then the government says, fine, I'll provide you all the infrastructure and the public services that you want. So, tax, we produce goods and services. We can afford, we pay the taxes on them, and then the taxes go to the government, and then the government makes the expenditure, and that adds to the GDP. Does that flow make sense?
It really makes sense, but I think there's something wrong somewhere in our country.
I think I get your concern. I get your concern, but I don't think the concern is about GDP. I think your concern is about governance. It's similar to or at least one of the aspects that Mr. Alidu was also referring to. A major problem we have is governance. So yeah, GDP is not the problem; it's the governance part that's the problem. Okay, all right. Thank you all for your questions. They added some flavor and brought more insight into the discussion. So I appreciate you for bringing them. Prince, thank you for your commentary and the questions that you asked, also insightful. So we call it a night now. Thank you so much for making this time on your Sunday nights to join us. I'm looking forward to our conversation next week. Next week, we intend to have, I think it's a case study that we intend to have next week. Stay tuned, 8 p.m. GMT next Sunday. If you missed anything or you want to go play back old conversations, search for Money Convos wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Money Convos and go play back our old conversation. Until then, I wish you a productive week.
Right.
Have a good
Kev.
Yeah. Oh, Prince,
Yeah. So we thank everyone for being part of today's discussion. So please, let's also share it with our colleagues, our friends that we wish they will also be on this call so that they can also learn as we are also learning, so that together we can all have better financial education that will impact how we are building our financial journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prince. Not just for ourselves, for other people. Great. And I like to say that if we are only we are financially independent, everyone will come to us for money. And our money won't reach us, so we'll not be financially independent again. Or we'll just be stingy people. But if we share it with other people, they also become financially independent. And hey, you get to keep the money that you make. So think that way too. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I wish you a productive week. Catch you again Sunday, 8 p.m. GMT. Goodbye. Good night.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our thoughts. I hope you learned a thing or two and start practicing. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast. Do tell a friend about Money Convos so we all become wealthy together. Talk to you soon. Bye.